You know, me personally, it's up to you. I don't care what you believe. And me personally, I've never been much of a religious person. But if I've ever felt like there was some force out there meant to, I don't know, punish me for maybe not believing in things like that, it would be the Chicago Bulls. I almost feel as though the Chicago Bulls exist to mess with me. And that's what they've always been. And this instance is no different. The Chicago Bulls just beat the Minnesota Timberwolves in a double overtime game. And if you go ahead and look at how they've been performing ever since the All-Star break, it's actually pretty insane. If you take a look at the NBA.com's advanced stats post All-Star break, the Chicago Bulls are 5th in defensive rating, 5th in offensive rating, and 2nd in net rating. And yet in their last 10, the only 10 that they've played, they somehow managed to have a record of 6-4. That truly does show just where this team is. So I wanted to talk about that game as well as how the Bulls have been performing post All-Star break because I do find it fascinating. People have chalked it up to like a Patrick Beverley effect, and I did mention when the Chicago Bulls signed Patrick Beverley that I did think there was a world where potentially Patrick was able to impact how the team performed in a way that was more significant than his individual talent. Like, he would bring energy, defensive communication, getting on people's ass, telling them what to do, things like that. Another thing I want to talk about post All-Star break is Zach LaVine, who's been a huge part of this jump. And a post All-Star break, Zach LaVine is averaging 31 points per game on like 55, 45, 90 splits. It's not loading for me right now, but I remember what it was. Zach LaVine's been insane. The Chicago Bulls offense looks better than it really ever has, even better than when Lonzo Ball was there. They have managed to do this, but the lowest pace in the entire NBA. With the lowest pace in the entire NBA, the Chicago Bulls have been scoring 119 points a game. And I don't know why it's finally clicking. I really don't. This game versus the Timberwolves, DeMar and Zach, after not doing much in the first half for the next 2 quarters and double overtime, in totality, they finish with 88 points, which is pretty good. And historically speaking, when either of these guys have a good game, it really seems like the other is almost predetermined to, at best, have an okay game. It's kind of similar to the dynamic that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have always had, where it's like, it's just against the rules for both of these guys to have good games. But here we are. DeMar has 49 and Zach has 39. I guess we could talk about this game as a whole. I'm just kind of perplexed by this entire thing. I didn't decide to watch this game live, which was clearly a mistake because a lot of people were calling it one of the best games of the year. Some people even calling it the game of the year. I wouldn't say that. I thought that was a little bit too extreme. Maybe I just am that much of a hater of my own basketball team. But a game where the Bulls managed to beat in double overtime the Timberwolves without Anthony Edwards because he went out in the first quarter with an ankle injury. Maybe I'm just a dick, but I wasn't particularly impressed by that. Meanwhile, Jaden McDaniels stepped up rather significantly, especially towards the fourth quarter and going into overtime. He was pretty good the whole way through, but he really started to step his scoring game up. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was doing good things for a couple of quarters, and then when it came crunch time, he just made a lot of mistakes. In the second overtime, he airballed a free throw, like with a minute left in the game, which is not ideal. And then he got dunked on by Nikola Vucevic. So that was fun. That was one of Vucevic's best plays in a Chicago Bulls uniform, or at least one of the most visually impressive. For everybody else, Rudy Gobert almost had a 20-20 game. Kyle Anderson had a triple-double. I didn't even notice that, good lord, but he also shot 4 for 14. And Mike Conley set a career high in threes with 8 of them. As I mentioned, the first half of this game, it really felt like the Timberwolves had pretty good control of it up until like the last minute of the second quarter, where Zach LaVine just hit 2 ridiculous three-pointers. And if I was watching this game as a Bulls fan, I probably would have been like, yeah, I'm probably not going to watch this second half. And then Zach did that, and I was like, okay. Seems like things are turning in the Bulls' direction, not to mention that DeMar started to get his shot going. Really, they started their scoring with like 4 minutes left in the second quarter. Up until that point, there had been some good sets with Vucevic. He was really aggressive with his shot today, which I generally appreciate, although there were a lot of missed bunnies in this instance. A really nice backdoor pass to Alex Caruso that I remember, but in general, it was more of a team effort, and DeMar and Zach weren't really looking for their own shots, but as soon as they started to look for their shots, things started to turn around. Although, after that turnaround happened, again, going in from the third quarter, the Timberwolves had, if not a double-digit lead, something close to it, so it didn't exactly look like it was going to be a win. The Timberwolves just kind of managed to keep finding ways to score. I mentioned with J-Mac, with Mike Conley. I wouldn't say this was the most impressive defensive performance the Chicago Bulls have had in late, because they did give up so much offense to players who really shouldn't be scoring to the extent they did. I really believe in J-Mac and his potential, but there were some shots that the Bulls were letting him get that I was just like, you should be better than that. I don't mean to be so pessimistic after this, but it really just feels like too little too late. Like, you're finally going to be a good basketball team, at least on paper, because again, they managed to be 6-10, or sorry, 6-4, barely above 500, obviously, one game, with the second best net rating in the league. Explain that to me, other than just cosmic irony. I don't think there's anything else to explain it besides for that. They're now in the play-in tournament. They play Miami today. That it's not going to help them win this game today, given that they did go into a double overtime and multiple players played 50 minutes. But, you know, you can only hope. Miami's not exactly the best team in the world, and apparently the Chicago Bulls are the second best team statistically in basketball since the deadline, so maybe they can pull it off. There has been some hope sparked amongst the Bulls fan base as a result of all of this. At least visually good stuff. Again, they lost on a game winner to De'Aaron Fox the other day. They just have a tendency to lose close games. And really, that's been one of my biggest gripes with them, is their inability to close close games. There's been some discussion about like, hey, they could make the play-in, but ultimately, or they could even make the playoffs through the play-in and all that. But ultimately, what it comes down to, the Chicago Bulls are just gonna lose to either the Celtics, Bucks, or Sixers in the first round, however the seeding ends up going, you know. Maybe they'll get a game. If it's the Sixers, they won't, because the Bulls have not got a win in the Joel Embiid era in Philadelphia. They've won in Philly, but not in games that Joel Embiid has played. So, you know, if you're looking for any fuel for why I dislike Joel Embiid, I don't. But people like to argue that I do. But that would be a reason if there ever was one, because it's frustrating anytime I tune into a Sixers game and I'm like, come on, just finally win against him once. Anyways, ultimately this stuff doesn't matter that much. Ultimately, I still want them to blow this freaking team up in the offseason. And if anything, it's kind of painful for me to see them kind of put it together to an extent when, again, it is too little, too late. I still don't think this team's going to be coming back next year, whether that be there's some retooling or an outright blowing it up. One way or the other, it's a bright spot in a pool of shit. Not us coming out of the pool, I don't think. Fun metaphors for y'all. Happy to be an uplifting spirit for your day. But yeah, that was it. Shout out to Rudy for editing the video, and goodbye.